Presidency. With me on stage, I have Minister for Justice Gunnar Strömmer and Commissioner for Justice Didier Reynders. And I will start by giving the floor to Minister for Justice Gunnar Strömmer. Please, Gunnar, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Speaking for both the Justice and Home Affairs, you could say that we had for this from the Swedish Presidency three main priorities. It was to deliver on Ukraine, deliver on organized crime, deliver on migration. The deliver on migration came yesterday, and today we have focused on organized crime and Ukraine. I have had the pleasure of chairing the Justice part of the Justice and Home Affairs Council, and I'm grateful to all colleagues who participated in our discussion today. Security is an overarching priority for the Swedish Presidency. To ensure the safety of EU citizens, we have prioritized the fight against organized crime as a key issue for the Justice and Home Affairs Ministers. We all know that organized crime now knows no borders, and the EU must therefore be a central arena in this fight. Yesterday we took an important step when the ministers endorsed the proposal to launch a high-level expert group together with the Commission, with actors from different sectors who will work on operational challenges for the law enforcement regarding access to digital information. We need to make sure that new technical solutions do not lead to digital safe havens for criminals. The group will therefore be tasked to identify possible action to maintain law enforcement's access to digital communications. The group is going to work a year, and the first meeting will be held on the 19th of June. The group will be co-chaired by the Presidency and the Commission. Today, it is my great pleasure to share that the Council adopted 5 general approaches, several of which will make a substantial difference in our long-term commitment to fight against organized crime. The new directive on asset recovery and confiscation will be instrumental in making it harder for organized crime groups to engage in international operations, and will make it possible to track and identify assets as well as freeze and recover them. Under certain conditions, it will be possible to confiscate unexplained wealth based on an individual's involvement in organized crime activities. The directive has been a priority for the Presidency and is a huge step forward in ensuring that organized crime does not pay off. I am convinced that it will strengthen our joint effort to combat organized crime by going after the criminals' money. Organized crime groups are also often involved in human trafficking. The updated directive on human trafficking will better prevent and combat trafficking in human beings and protect its victims. It will, for instance, criminalize the use of services when the user knows that the person providing the services is a victim of trafficking. Trafficking in human beings is a terrible crime that violates basic human rights and needs to be eradicated from Europe and from the world as well. We also had a very interesting discussion on judicial aspects of the fight against organized crime. It is vital to make sure that our authorities can effectively investigate and prosecute organized crime and protect our citizens, while at the same time ensuring protection of fundamental rights. Finding the right balance between efficient law enforcement and the rights of the affected person is a key issue when we consider which tools should be available to our authorities, for example, to access electronic evidence. Today we had a very useful debate, and this is a conversation which will have to continue. We also adopted a general approach for the directive on combating violence against women and domestic violence. This is an important step in combating gender-based violence, and I believe it will be of great importance in our common work to protect and support victims of such crimes. Support to Ukraine is also an overarching priority for our Presidency. It's a long-term obligation, and as you all know, the EU's support for Ukraine has been on the agenda for all Justice and Home Affairs meetings since the beginning of Russia's aggression. Today, the Council adopted a general approach for the directive for criminalizing violations of EU restrictive measures. This directive will make a significant impact in making sanctions more effective. Ministers also discussed the ongoing work in Member States to investigate and prosecute violations of EU sanctions that have been put in place since the start of the war against Ukraine. Lastly, we adopted a general approach on the Directive Against Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation, the so-called Anti-SLAPP Directive. This is an important step for protecting public debate, media freedom and pluralism in the Union. During the meeting, the Presidency has also adopted Presidency conclusions on the safety of LGBTI persons in the European Union, which was supported by a vast majority of the Member States. For the Swedish Presidency, combating organised crime has been a key issue. The cross-border element of organised crime is striking, hence our response must also be cross-border. Therefore, I am happy and thankful for all the effort put in from all Member States on this long-term commitment. I will now hand over to Commissioner Didier Reynders for his remarks on today's meeting. Please, Didier.
No, thank you, Gunnar, and good afternoon, everyone. Before I continue, let me extend my warmest thanks to Gunnar and his team for their leadership and cooperation over the last 6 months, and today, because we have had a lot of results today. And firstly, on Ukraine, the Council has reached an agreement for a general approach on measures to strengthen the enforcement of EU sanctions and ensure harmonization across the European Union in this field. I welcome the support of all Member States for the agreement reached today. As we highlighted in the past, making the violation of EU sanctions a Eurocrime will ensure that anyone who tries to circumvent our sanctions will face similar punishments across the Union. Furthermore, it will allow us to confiscate frozen assets when such a crime is committed, together with the proposal for a new directive on asset recovery and confiscations, which ministers also discussed today with my colleague Eva Johansson. We will ensure that violations of sanctions do not pay. In today's discussions, I also reiterate the Commission's priorities for this legislation. In order for this legislation to work in practice, it is important that we maintain the ambition of our proposal. For example, we need to ensure that we criminalise violations of sanctions related on grounds of serious negligence, very often enabling financial institutions to violate sanctions through a lack of due diligence. We also need fines for violations to be based on annual turnover so that they hit sufficiently hard. And crucially, we need to ensure transposition is not delayed so that the Union can continue to act rapidly and decisively. Nobody needs reminding of the urgency of this issue. I therefore hope we can see this directive being transposed and operating by 2024. But again, it is very encouraging to see that this work is moving forward, and I look forward to starting negotiations with the co-legislators when the European Parliament has agreed their position. In parallel, we also discuss at length our broader work in this area. Our Freeze and Seize task force has stepped up its work to coordinate actions across the European Union, with 24.3 billion euros in assets held by listed persons and entities being frozen to date since the beginning of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. We have confirmed today that we have over 230 active criminal investigations into violations of sanctions across the EU. This work is complemented by an enhanced role for Eurojust and Europol, as well as strong cooperation with our international partners. Discussions are also ongoing on the use of Russian sovereign assets to generate resources for Ukraine. To this day, Member States have reported over 200 billion euro of immobilized Russian central bank assets under the 10th sanctions package. Discussions are ongoing on the adoption of the 11th sanctions package. And let me repeat my thanks to the Presidency for their steering work here. Those responsible for the international crimes committed in Ukraine must be held accountable and should pay the damage of their action. Is the reason why just after the announcement of the destruction of the Kakhovka dam, I have had a contact with the Prosecutor General of Ukraine, Andrei Kostin, to say that we'll give our support, of course, to national investigations in Ukraine, but also to international investigations by the ICC, and the Prosecutor General of Ukraine has had some contacts with Karim Khan, the Prosecutor of the ICC, in such a way, so to organize a common approach at the national and international level. En ce qui concerne les poursuites abusives.
As for abusive proceedings against human rights defenders, otherwise known as gagging or the slap proceedings, we have an agreement for a general approach. We found that today too. This is crucially important in order to reinforce defence instruments for democracy and freedom of expression. These rules will provide robust guarantees against these multiple judicial proceedings in the EU in cross-border civil cases. And I think what we have today is a solid basis for future negotiations, which I hope will be fruitful. Hopefully we'll be able to conclude on that soon. I'd like to mention a couple of equality dossiers. Helena Dalli, my fellow commissioner, was delighted that we were able to work on conclusions on LGBTI persons. The invitation is to protect these persons more against violence and discrimination. We've also worked on a general approach today on the directive on combating violence against women and domestic violence. We've still got work to do, and we're looking forward to negotiations starting quickly, and we'll make sure that an ambitious text which is fully in line with the Istanbul Convention, which we want to accede to, will be adopted. Now, at the lunch, we were focused on efforts to combat organised crime with Ulva Johansson, my fellow commissioner. We saw a clear determination to do more in this area, not just to ensure that agencies such as Europol and Eurojust are able to play a leading role in all this, but also to ensure that EU case law and fundamental rights are fully respected when we give investigative powers to the police. The powers that they need. Cooperation between the different players is crucially important in this area, and I'm sure that our high-level expert group will be able to start working on this area. Fighting organised crime is not just about ensuring that such crimes are prosecuted, but also to protect victims. When it comes to trafficking in human beings, we've adopted an agreement to update our legislation on this. That means that we're moving towards our objective that allows us to have an appropriate, robust framework for the future. Yesterday, I was able to present the Justice Scoreboard. I won't rehash the presentation again. I presented it to the ministers. We do hope it will feed into our rule of law report that will be published between now and the middle of July, but will also feed into national debate.
Prosecutor Laura Kövesi on the work of the European Public Prosecutor Office. Under Mrs. Kövesi's leadership, the IPPO has had a remarkably successful first 2 years of operations, and I congratulate her and her team. To ensure this continues, I stress the need for strong and sincere cooperation between the IPPO and non-participating member states. And Mrs. Kövesi, ministers, and I will continue to discuss ways to improve the work of the EPPO, as well as the recruitment of European delegate prosecutors. The Commission study due this summer will be very valuable in shaping the EPPO's work going forward, so we'll see if it's needed to amend the regulation to make some progress in the functioning of the EPPO, but we stress the urgency to have a very strong cooperation of all the Member States in the process with the EPPO. Lastly, on transatlantic data transfers, I reiterate to Ministers today that on the EU side, all the preparations are underway and should be finalized soon. For our work here to progress further, we also need to see appropriate implementing measures taken on the US side. We expect this to happen soon, and I'm grateful for the support of Ministers on this. So as you can see, it was a productive meeting to conclude a very effective presidency with, again, 5 general approach today. And let me thank Gunnar once again for such a result. Of course, we are already looking forward for a similarly strong cooperation with the incoming presidency, with the Spanish presidency. I hope that together we can bring the 5 files agreed today and many others towards conclusion as quickly as possible. And I want just to conclude to say that I have also informed the Minister of Justice about the reaction of the Commission concerning the decision taken by the Court of Justice on Monday in relation with the justice reform in Poland. I want just to say that it's very important that we have a correct application of all the decisions of the Court of Justice in the entire European Union, because it's the highest court of the European Union with binding decision. And this is why I regret the statements by the Polish Minister of Justice this week attacking the judgment of the Court of Justice and even criticizing the Court of Justice itself. Let me just reiterate here that Court of Justice rulings are again binding and they must be implemented. The Commission therefore trusts that the Polish authorities will swiftly and fully implement the judgment in question as necessary under the EU treaties. It's a commitment of all the Member States to implement the decisions of the Court of Justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Reinders. I open up for questions online or in the room. Do we have any questions? Yes, please. Blas Mohoric, online, please.
Hello, Blas Mohoric from Slovenian Press Agency. I have a Slovenian minister has informed you about the adoption of the Convention on the Cooperation in the Prosecution of War Crimes. So that was adopted a few weeks ago in Slovenia. I would like to know how important is this convention, in your opinion, in the context of the Russian aggression against Ukraine? Thank you.
Oh, I was in Ljubljana to discuss with all the participants in those negotiations because it's European Day Against Impunity, and it was very important to explain that in the actual circumstances, of course, it's very important to have a legal assistance, a mutual legal assistance with many partners when we are discussing about international crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and that's very useful. And so now that we have such a new agreement, it will be easier maybe to work on those crimes when there are contacts to take between different justice systems. So no, it's a very important element, and we have thanks the Slovenian authorities for the organization of such a conference, because it was very useful during some weeks to see intense negotiations to have a real success with the adoption of the convention, and that will facilitate the relations and the work in common and together between different partners against those crimes.
Okay, do we have any other questions? I don't see that. Then I think we can conclude this press conference. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice afternoon. Thank you.